Hi guys, welcome to Office Blokes React. I'm Office Bloke Dave.
I'm Office Bloke Mike.
I'm Office Bloke Daz.
Together we're the Office Blokes.
Yes,
It's true.
we are indeed.
If you would like to win this t-shirt,
That actual one.
that actual one, all you have to do is head to our Just Stop Oil Protesters Getting Wrecked video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and comment JFO.
JFO, like Foxtrot.
Like Foxtrot.
Very similar.
What's J in the...
Juliet?
I'm asking you, dickhead.
Juliet.
You didn't buzz in.
Juliet Foxtrot Oscar.
Yep.
There you go. Good guess. Right then, why Osama bin Laden attacked the US?
Did he?
He's classed as responsible for 9/11, isn't
Okay.
he?
Yeah.
I think he was the orchestrator of a lot of it. I don't know.
Why?
I don't know. Maybe this will tell us the answer.
He was trained by the US, wasn't he?
His family are from Saudi, aren't they? His
But-
family's a big construction company in Saudi.
I thought during the Russian invasion of
Chechnya.
Afghanistan, I thought the Americans trained the Afghans who were the
probably.
Taliban at the time.
Possibly.
Like people say in the comment section, I'm either wrong or usually like half right about these things and conflating.
It makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah. But let's find out why Osama bin Laden attacked the US.
Osama bin Laden went down in history for his obsession with attacking the United States and its allies, never giving up on his mad quest until he was finally gunned down by SEAL Team 6 in 2011. But why was this terrorist mastermind so obsessed with the United States? Why did he attack the US in the first place? If you ask many intellectuals, they'll tell you that most terrorists aren't powerful criminals, but rather people driven by desperation to strike out against a government they view as oppressing them. This applied to many of bin Laden's henchmen, who were sponsored by Al-Qaeda's inner circle to train in its terror camps. But it did not apply to Osama bin Laden. Osama grew up in Saudi Arabia in the lap of luxury, as the son of Mohammed bin Awad bin Laden. To say that the elder bin Laden was a success would be putting it lightly. He was a billionaire construction magnate who ensured his family was well taken care of, his very large family at that. Osama bin Laden was born in 1957 as a son of Mohammed bin Laden's 10th wife. In total, his father had 52 children. His mother divorced the billionaire soon after Osama was born, but Osama would ultimately inherit at least $25 million from his father.
Wow.
52 kids.
Yeah.
52 kids and he don't live in Benchill. Wow.
I suppose culturally, you're maybe not as hands-on as a dad.
You reckon? It'd be difficult being hands-on to 52 of them.
Yeah.
10th wife, though.
Wow. Yeah.
So what's that? It's 5 point something. 5.2.
On average.
Yeah.
Per wife. Poor women.
So, he was well taken care of. But where did his radicalism begin? The bin Laden family was devoutly religious, but followed a mainstream version of the Sunni Muslim faith. They were well assimilated into Saudi culture, and no one would expect one of the clan to become an infamous terrorist. He didn't follow a career path that would lead to extremism either. If you knew him back in the 70s, you would have known him as a mild-mannered economics and business student in King Abdulaziz University in Jeddah. He graduated, although reports vary on what he majored in. But we do know he briefly attended a class at Oxford. Those who knew him reported he was passionate about poetry, military history, and soccer. So, how did it all go so horribly wrong?
I watched a YouTube video ages ago that was the files of bin Laden's PC had been sort of captured by the CIA or someone, but they got released. And I think it was a massive Elvis, or am I thinking of might be Kim Jong-un that's the big Elvis fan. There was stuff that was found on his
Take
PC.
on his facts again.
I know, yeah. That's exactly what was going through my mind as I was
It's
talking.
Bin Laden or Kim Jong-il.
No, but it's there was lots of quite Western things. Like I think there was TV shows and music and things like that.
Yeah,
that
I think I remember something similar.
Yeah,
When they found them, it's but didn't they find a lot of porn as well, allegedly?
I think they found all types of stuff. There was lots of grim stuff on there as well, of like the videos of people getting killed and all that sort of stuff. But
That was his porn.
yeah, probably was actually.
It all started when he left college in 1979 and he went to Afghanistan to fight against the Soviet Union. The invasion of Afghanistan had galvanized him to become a political radical, but he had no reason to hate the United States at that point. In fact, the US and the Soviet Union were bitter enemies. The groups he worked with, like the Mujahideen, had even received financial support from the United States as they battled to hold the Soviets at bay. The Saudis provided support against the Soviets as well, and it seemed like bin Laden's interests were well in line with those of the larger Western countries. But then, something changed. By the time Osama bin Laden became a public name in the West due to a series of escalating terror attacks against US interests, his motivations had dramatically changed, and so had his status in the world. His turn to anti-West radicalism had led to his Saudi citizenship being revoked. After all, the Saudis greatly valued their alliance with the United States, particularly due to their rivalry with Iran, and they didn't want to be associated with a wild card. Bin Laden found himself a stateless terrorist, finding refuge in countries like Sudan, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, and he would only surface occasionally to make threatening videotapes. And on these videotapes, his motivation started to become clearer. What turned the son of a Saudi billionaire construction magnate into a terrorist radical? Bin Laden gave many explanations, and not all of them really matched up. Not long after the 9/11 attacks, bin Laden released his first new videotape taking credit for the attacks, and he singled out one main reason for the attack. This was the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which had been raging for over 50 years at that point. If you ask the Israelis, they had fended off a genocidal war of invasion against a newborn country and taken the territory they needed to defend themselves. If you ask the Palestinians or the surrounding Arab states, they'd been expelled from their territory by newcomers to the region and had been fighting to get their lands back ever since. But was this regional conflict enough to create a global war? In a word, probably not. While the Israeli-Palestinian conflict always makes emotions run high, just ask anyone in the comments section in an article about Gal Gadot, it was also a relatively small-scale conflict. The conflict over the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Jewish Temple Mount was likely the most concerning to a religious zealot like bin Laden, but there was one problem with the idea that this was his motivation. Prior to this video, he had never mentioned the conflict before. The odds are that after striking his biggest blow yet against the US and becoming public enemy number one, he was hoping that bringing up this hot topic would get him more support from the countries in the region. But other conflicts may have had more to do with his radicalization. The Gulf War was one of the largest conflicts of the 1990s, with the United States ultimately stopping Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait, but leaving the Iraqi dictator in power. Saddam was infamous for his brutal treatment of minority groups like the Kurds, and frequently attacked U.S. planes entering his airspace. Iraqi forces even attempted to assassinate former President George H.W. Bush shortly after he left office, so the UN imposed sanctions on Iraq as long as Saddam refused to cooperate with international authorities, and this led to a trade embargo and widespread suffering in Iraq. And that was enough to get bin Laden deeply angry. He first mentioned the sanctions in his 1998 fatwa against Americans, claiming that over 1 million Iraqis had been killed by the sanctions and saying that targeting civilians was permissible due to this carnage. But bin Laden had no direct ties to the Iraqis and had never fought in the country, and in fact, Saddam was a very different sort of radical to him. Saddam led a military dictatorship that had no real alliance with Islamic radical groups, and when he was deposed by the United States a few years later, it created an opening for al-Qaeda in the country. So bin Laden basing his entire worldview around this issue would seem unlikely. But other conflicts were on his radar as well. Bin Laden's manifesto also mentioned countless conflicts regarding Muslims in the world. They included Russia's oppression of the Chechen Muslim minority in the Soviet Union, the ongoing border conflict in Kashmir between Hindu India and Muslim Pakistan, the Philippine government's conflict with Muslim groups, and Israel's ongoing northern border conflict with Lebanon. In each of these cases, bin Laden said the United States was aiding these groups to oppress Muslims. There was just one problem with that. The US had little to nothing to do with any of these conflicts. While they were allies with some of the countries, the government had little to do with them. In Russia's assault on Chechnya, the US had frosty relationships with its geopolitical rival, at best, even after the fall of the Soviet Union. The one exception was bin Laden's mention of the conflict in Somalia, where US involvement led to a bloody conflict that was immortalized in the movie Black Hawk Down. But none of these conflicts were particularly close to bin Laden, and his inclusion of them started to look more like a list of grievances than a smoking gun. He had one complaint that didn't match the others though, and this one might have had some right-wing Americans nodding along. In his 2002 letter to America, his first time communicating with the outside world after the 9/11 attacks, he decided to broaden his complaints to America's domestic conduct. But he didn't accuse them of oppressing Muslim Americans. Instead, he went on a rant about America's immorality. Some of his complaints included the country's support of promiscuous sex, gay rights, alcohol and drugs, and gambling. He also oddly complained about trading with interest prohibited in Islam, but something common in banking around the world. Was Osama bin Laden suddenly becoming a culture critic? While many anti-American radicals do criticize America's domestic policies, in addition to its foreign policies, while not being fully fledged terrorists, this appears to be another case like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, where bin Laden seemed to generate a new grievance after the attacks that put him on the world stage. It's unlikely that this was his primary grievance that motivated the attacks, but a savvy propagandist like bin Laden might have put it in the manifesto to set Americans against each other.
It's a huge list of reasons he
Wow.
didn't attack the US, isn't it, so
Yeah.
far? I suppose there's probably a lot of speculation in there.
Yeah, no, I don't think anyone will get down to the bottom of it. Obviously, he's dead now. But, you know, there's, like you say, a lot of speculation going on
Yeah.
over the period, hasn't there?
Yeah.
It's probably because they're the world's biggest superpower, and that makes you the target of a lot of people.
I think
It's a lot of
been
jealousy,
because of
isn't
that. Yeah, absolutely.
You know, we have people in our comments who give us a lot of shit. They don't even know us,
Just
but speculating of who we are and what we're about.
Yeah, I think
That's the way it works.
Yeah, there's always been that about the US, aren't there? People in a lot of countries that aren't Westernized, especially, maybe there's a lot of jealousy there and a lot of maybe not a great understanding of the way things work. I don't know.
I think criticising domestic policies is a bit rich for any country because you can't tell people how to live their lives in their
correct.
own country.
Well, they don't want you telling them how to run their country, do they? So, you know, you, like I say, your own domestic policies and rules
So
and
then
regulations.
maybe if the US have, say, after the Gulf War, have maybe imposed some of their domestic policies in Iraq, for example, maybe there'd be a pushback of we don't want to live how you want to live, we want to live how we want to live. I can see that, but
Yeah,
I don't know.
you see it with Afghanistan now. Now the Taliban are back in power. You know, the way they run things is very different to how it was being run when the American forces were based there.
It's true. And they've got a Twitter account, and they've never been banned from Twitter.
Really?
The Taliban. Yep.
Wow.
It's like a
They're a legal political
political party, aren't they?
Well, they are now, aren't they?
Yeah, I think Hamas might
Even
be
though.
on Twitter as well. There's a few, because when people get banned off Twitter, that's the go-to argument is the Taliban have got a Twitter.
Yeah.
How can you justify that and not let me on there?
Bizarre, isn't it? It really is.
After all, if right-wing Americans start blaming the gay rights movement for terror attacks, maybe they'll be too busy fighting with each other to find him. But most experts believe one factor motivated him more than any other. The year was 1991, and Saddam Hussein had invaded the oil-rich Persian Gulf state of Kuwait. Even though we've already discovered that Saddam Hussein didn't fully support bin Laden's cause, the roots of his rage might be tied to the war anyway. The US and Saudi Arabia were closely aligned, and the Saudis quickly invited US troops onto their soil to launch their attacks on Iraq from there, and to provide some insurance in case Saddam decided to take his quest for oil even further. And when the war ended, the US stuck around. From 1992 to 2003, the US had around 5,000 troops stationed in Saudi Arabia, mostly to conduct air operations over Iraq. While Saddam had been pushed back, there had never been any formal peace agreement, and he continued to behave aggressively toward his neighbors. This was something the Saudis agreed to and in fact invited. Their security was endangered by Saddam as well, and business relations with the US were important to both countries. The US presence was vital to protecting the shipping lanes of the Persian Gulf. So, why did this fill bin Laden with rage? Simple. The US agreed, the Saudis agreed, but no one asked him. While most people involved felt that the security benefits were worth it, Osama bin Laden viewed even the voluntary presence of US troops on Saudi soil as an invasion of holy Muslim land. While the troops were nowhere near the sacred cities of Mecca and Medina, they were too close for this radical. And there is ample evidence that this might have been the trigger that turned him into an anti-American militant. For one thing, it was the only motivation mentioned in the very first fatwa he issued in 1996, demanding the US evacuate Saudi Arabia. 2 years later, he referred to it as an invasion, in which the United States had been plundering the country and humiliating the people. He believed it was a staging ground for an assault on the entire Muslim world, and repeatedly accused the Americans of being too close to Mecca. The U.S. presence in Saudi Arabia would eventually end when the second war with Iraq began due to the Saudis opposing that conflict, but this was the only motivation that bin Laden kept coming back to. Which means, ironically, Osama bin Laden's reason for wanting to declare war on America might have been that his home country invited them in to protect them from a hostile neighbor. Of course, if you ask 10 people why Osama bin Laden hated America, you'll probably get 10 answers, and most of them will reflect on the person's opinions more than the truth. Want to learn more about Osama bin Laden's beginnings? Check out how this...
It's interesting that. It's more of a debate than an answer.
It is a debate,
though.
yeah.
It is really, yeah.
But it's just, he's obviously...
Some of it's going to be guesswork if you don't get it from the horse's mouth, which is not going to now. Then.
No.
Yeah, exactly.
There's
That's what I was saying
always
before.
going to be a debate about it, isn't
Yeah.
it? Really is. It's certainly something to do with Western values and the West in general, I would guess.
Western debauchery where, people are sleeping with multiple people. You need to marry multiple people and then you can sleep with them.
Yeah,
it's
there's a
just
lot-
bang out of order.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we have our values here, which we think are right. They have their values over there that they think are right. I've been to Saudi Arabia, and it's a place. It's a real eye opener. Even when call to prayer comes and they threw me out the restaurant, I had to go outside, take my food off me and everything. Well, I just ordered. I was like, hey, yep, call to prayer, out, shutters are down, doors are locked and all that. And it's kind of like, it's a very strict Muslim country. Super strict.
But it's their way of doing things, so that's fine.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
then over here, we have our way of doing things, and people know what it is, and so each their own to a certain extent.
It's not that because you can go to the USA or go to Britain, and people will try and infiltrate what your cultures are. If you try and do that in Saudi Arabia, watch how fast you're in prison.
Yeah,
I can imagine.
Yeah, and your punishment isn't prison, isn't like a little bit of remand, then you'll appear in court, and then you'll go. You know the score there.
Yeah.
You know what you're going to get into if you get put away there.
Won't be
It's not going to be. It's not going to be easy.
£50 fine and off you go.
Say that now. It's not going to be easy. Yeah, and all these woke people who just stop oil and all that. Go and just stop oil in Saudi where it's produced, where the biggest oil producing country in the world or whatever it is. Go over there and start causing grief over there. See what happens. Nip it in the bud.
Can we pay for the plane tickets to go?
Yeah,
I'll put towards it.
I guarantee they won't even get through customs. The passport control.
Yeah.
Because it'd be, I'm not queuing in that. It's too long. And come here, out in there, male or female, don't give a shit.
I think because the pendulum has gone so far one way in the West, I think there's going to be a big push back and things are going to go a lot more conservative in values and things over the next few years, personally.
I think there's going to be a big change in a lot of the way things happen very soon.
I think so.
And it's all pending on one specific incident that's going to happen in the next few weeks. And when that happens...
Are you speculated on... Oh, have you got an incident in mind, or is it just something?
It's none of my business, but I'll tell you when we're off air. But it's once that incident happens, it'll be free for all.
But I think the answer to, because things like have gone so woke in a lot of the West, and then the pushback is the pendulum swings the other way, and then it'll go so conservative, and it'll be less rights for certain people. Obviously, somewhere in the middle is probably where we want to exist, isn't it? But when you're having that video we did before, when people are just robbing shops and the cops don't do anything, that's what you get. So of course it's going to go back another way. But like you say, maybe one big incident and then our values change.
Everyone's protesting everything. Someone's onto something all the time and protesting this and don't want that. Don't like this. Don't like it. You don't have to like it. Move on to something else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I don't know. And I get the Just Stop Oil guys protesting. I understand that. I understand climate change and we've got to do something about it. 100% get it. We do our bit, so I'm fine.
Yeah.
Don't block me on the road. We've done our bit.
Well,
you
Britain's
do your
probably
bit.
doing more than most countries, I would guess.
Yeah.
For reducing climate change, going to electric vehicles, stuff like that. There's other countries that are a hell of a lot worse.
Yeah.
So
look
go
at
to those.
The Commonwealth canopy that the Queen was doing, where she wanted the whole planet for a ring around the planet of new
trees,
forests being built. And it's like that. She's been doing that. She's dedicated a couple of decades to trying to do that.
Yeah.
And King Charles, has taken over. And
he's been doing it a long time as well, hasn't he?
Yeah,
Doing
it's
environmental issues.
There's lots of people actively trying to do that.
Yeah, we're diversifying here, but
We are.
yeah, but they have it.
Just stop oil, buy some fucking land, put your money where your mouth is, and
Go to
plant
Saudi
some
Arabia,
trees.
nip it in the bud. Go and try and sabotage the pipeline that runs from Dammam to all the way to Jeddah, and see what happens.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, that's all. Just have a go. See what happens. Like you say, we can all chip in. We'll do a GoFundMe to pay them all to go.
Yeah, I'm
Get
alright
them a
with that.
visa. I'll even go to the Saudi embassy to get the visas for them.
Yeah.
We'll drop off at the airport.
Yeah.
On push bikes, of course, not in the car. 'cause
Push
obviously
back. They're not allowed to fly, actually. They've got to go there on camel.
They'd probably go if you said if you could get them in a limousine, you'd probably go then.
Yeah, private jet.
Yeah.
Anyway, Hope you guys enjoyed that. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll catch you on the next one.
Cheers, guys.